The first warning sign wasn't the condescending memo. It was the new organizational chart posted in the break room with my name buried 3 levels deeper than it had been the previous month. My name is Quinn Carter, I'm 52 years old, and I just spent the most satisfying afternoon of my career watching 14 years of industrial automation expertise walk out the door while a nervous executive sweated through his designer shirt. But let me rewind and explain how a former Air Force technician with 2 decades of manufacturing systems experience became persona non grata in exactly 37 minutes. After 14 years maintaining the automated production systems at Vanguard Pharmaceutical Manufacturing, they relocated my workstation from the climate-controlled control room overlooking the production floor to a cramped desk in the administrative wing next to the marketing team's brainstorming area. No discussion, no advance notice. Just an email at 6:47 a.m. that read, "Excited to have you join the administrative team space. Fresh perspectives await." Party popper. Fresh perspectives. As if I was some intern rotating through departments instead of the engineer who had kept their $890 million annual production operation running flawlessly for nearly a decade and a half. I didn't protest. I didn't send angry emails or schedule meetings with upper management to complain. I simply packed my toolbox, my calibration equipment, my framed photo of my daughter Zoe graduating from Purdue Engineering, and my collection of system documentation binders, and relocated to the administrative wing. The same methodical approach I'd used since joining Vanguard in 2011, systematic, efficient, zero theatrics. If you're new here and enjoying these powerful stories, make sure to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more. Let me know in the comments what part of today's story touched you most. You see, I'm not someone who requires constant validation or executive recognition. I need precision instruments, reliable data, and access to the machinery that keeps this facility producing 2.4 million units of critical medications every single week. What I received instead was Harrison Lowe, our newly appointed VP of Operations Excellence, fresh from a consulting firm in Boston with an MBA from Wharton, a TED Talk about operational disruption, and an unhealthy fixation on industry jargon that meant absolutely nothing to anyone actually doing the work. This man was 34 years old, referred to our custom-built Siemens S7-1500 PLC systems as legacy equipment, and described our FDA-validated process controls as charmingly old school. He wore Italian leather shoes to production floor meetings and brought acai bowls to safety briefings. Still, I extended professional courtesy. Even when he started making comments during operations reviews like, "We need innovative thinkers here. People who grew up with Industry 4.0, not people who remember when automation meant a timer and a switch." Then he'd glance directly at me and add, "Though Quinn's got such valuable historical knowledge, maybe she can help train someone with more contemporary automation instincts." Contemporary automation instincts. That was fascinating coming from someone who probably learned about manufacturing in a classroom case study while I was building automated systems for aircraft maintenance operations at Ramstein Air Base in Germany. But absolutely, tell me about innovation. I didn't argue. I didn't correct his fundamental misunderstandings about industrial control systems. I just continued monitoring the process variables, maintaining the preventive maintenance schedules, and doing what I'd done for 14 years, ensuring Vanguard Pharmaceutical Manufacturing maintained FDA compliance and production targets while everyone else worried about their personal branding strategies. You want to understand what 14 years looks like in my world? It's maintaining 99.94% production uptime while regulatory agencies conduct surprise inspections. It's receiving emergency calls at 1:15 a.m. because a temperature sensor in Reactor 3 started drifting out of specification, driving to the facility in my work clothes, and recalibrating the entire measurement loop before the next batch cycle begins at 4 a.m. It's the automated filling line that packages 186,000 units per shift without a single contamination event because I redesigned the clean room pressurization controls in 2017 after a vendor upgrade created dead zones in the airflow pattern. It's the environmental monitoring system that tracks 340 different parameters across 6 production zones and automatically adjusts conditions before any deviation becomes a quality issue. It's the relationships with FDA inspectors who know my name and trust my documentation because I've demonstrated 15 times over the years that our validation protocols exceed requirements. It's saving this company $2.3 million annually through predictive maintenance optimization that prevents equipment failures before they impact production schedules. I'm not embellishing these facts. I'm stating the documented reality of my contribution to this organization. When the cleanroom HVAC system failed at 3 a.m. on Thanksgiving weekend, I was the engineer who drove to the facility and rebuilt the control logic before our Monday morning production run. When our primary ingredient supplier changed their bulk delivery system without proper notification and our automated weighing stations started throwing errors, I reprogrammed the entire recipe management system in 48 hours to keep production on schedule. No performance bonuses. No title promotions. Just a "thank you for your dedication" email from some director I'd never met and maybe a catered lunch during National Engineers Week. But I didn't perform this work for recognition. I did it because these systems required someone who genuinely understood the intersection of mechanical engineering, process chemistry, regulatory compliance, and industrial automation. Someone who could think 3 steps ahead of potential failures. That's the reality for engineers like me, the invisible infrastructure that keeps essential medications flowing to patients who depend on them. My daughter Zoe, who's 24 and working as a process engineer at an automotive supplier in Detroit, sometimes questions my loyalty during our weekly video calls. "Mom," she'll say with concern in her voice, "you could make significantly more consulting for multiple companies. Why do you stay?" The answer was straightforward. Professional integrity. Perhaps old-fashioned, possibly naive integrity to an organization that had provided me stable employment and comprehensive benefits for over a decade. I believed that technical excellence and consistent reliability would eventually be recognized and appropriately valued. I was about to discover how fundamentally mistaken that belief was. The morning of March 8th began like every other Wednesday. I arrived at the facility at 6:45 a.m., collected my coffee from the break room, and settled into my administrative wing desk to review the overnight production reports. Everything appeared normal. All 6 production lines operating within specification, environmental controls stable, no critical alarms or process deviations. Around 9:30 a.m., I observed Harrison conducting a walkthrough of the control room with Amanda Fletcher from Human Resources, both carrying iPads and speaking in hushed tones that carried an unmistakable sense of purpose. They would pause at different workstations, examine computer screens, and nod to each other with that knowing expression executives practice. At one point, Harrison stood outside the glass wall of the control room for approximately 5 minutes, just watching me work through the administrative wing window. I could sense his presence, but I maintained focus on my screen and continued updating the calibration schedule for our analytical instruments. When I finally looked up, they had moved on to observe Dylan Crane, our process automation specialist. Dylan was 28, exceptionally talented, and one of the few people in this facility who actually comprehended the complexity of what I'd built over the past 14 years. He'd been shadowing me for 8 months, learning the intricacies of our hybrid automation architecture that combined legacy PLCs, modern SCADA systems, and custom integration middleware. If anything happened to me, he'd be the only person with even a basic understanding of how to maintain operational continuity. At 1:43 p.m., everything changed. A calendar invitation appeared on my screen. Subject line: Operations Review Meeting. Time: 2:20 p.m. That gave me exactly 37 minutes to prepare for whatever corporate execution Harrison had orchestrated. No agenda items. No meeting objectives. No preparatory materials. Just a thumbs-up emoji and the phrase, "Looking forward to connecting." Like we were college friends planning a coffee date instead of whatever professional termination he'd carefully planned. I don't participate in ambush meetings. Never have in my entire career. In the Air Force, we called it proper preparation prevents poor performance. If you need my time, you schedule it 72 hours in advance with clear objectives and supporting documentation, not this cheerful emoji nonsense designed to catch people off guard. But I attended anyway because that's what professionals do. That's what engineers like me do, even when we know exactly what's coming. Conference room 3C smelled like stale coffee and corporate anxiety. The ventilation system hummed with that characteristic sound that told me the damper actuator needed lubrication. Harrison was already positioned at the head of the table, leaning back in his ergonomic chair with the confidence of someone who'd never personally built or fixed anything in his entire career. His laptop displayed what appeared to be an organizational chart covered in red annotations and arrows. Amanda Fletcher occupied the corner seat, clutching a legal folder with the intensity of someone protecting classified information. She had that rapid blinking pattern and frozen smile that HR professionals adopt when they're about to terminate someone's employment but want to frame it as a positive career development opportunity. "Quinn," Harrison said, stretching my name out like we had some kind of personal rapport. "Thanks for making time. I know you're managing a lot, keeping our production systems running smoothly." The word "our" felt different now. Like he was already planning my replacement before I'd even left the building. "Let me start by saying," he continued, shifting into his rehearsed corporate presentation mode, "I want to acknowledge everything you've contributed here. 14 years of service. That's genuinely remarkable in today's dynamic business environment." I nodded once. Remained silent. When someone opens with gratitude that sounds like it's being read from a script, the termination is already decided. "We've been conducting a comprehensive analysis of our operations structure," Harrison continued, clicking through slides on his laptop. "Evaluating our technical capabilities, assessing our human capital optimization, and aligning resources with our digital transformation roadmap." More meaningless corporate terminology. I could have created a drinking game from this conversation and been unconscious before he finished his second slide. "The reality is," he said, finally attempting something resembling directness, "we're entering a new operational paradigm. IoT-enabled manufacturing, machine learning-driven quality systems, cloud-based process analytics. We need team members who can really embrace next-generation manufacturing philosophies." Next-generation manufacturing philosophies. Right. Because apparently 14 years of keeping their FDA-approved production systems compliant and operational was somehow a previous generation philosophy. "So we've made the strategic decision to bring in fresh talent," he said, still avoiding direct eye contact. "Someone who can bridge our current capabilities with our digital manufacturing future. Someone more technologically current." Technologically current. That was a creative euphemism. I'd been designing and maintaining industrial automation systems since before this person discovered what a PLC was, but apparently my technological currency had expired. Amanda intervened, her voice carrying a slight tremor. "We have a separation package that we believe is extremely generous, Quinn. Full severance based on years of service, extended health insurance coverage, professional outplacement assistance, and naturally will provide outstanding references for your future opportunities." She was reading from prepared talking points. Probably the identical script they used for every experienced engineer they'd decided had exceeded their useful employment life. I raised my hand. Not aggressively, just definitively. The way you stop someone mid-sentence when the conversation is heading somewhere unproductive. "Let me save everyone some time," I said, my voice steadier than the anger I felt. "You've made your decision and I've just made mine." Harrison blinked twice. "Well, just to clarify, this isn't absolutely final yet. We still have transition planning to discuss, knowledge transfer sessions to schedule." "I'm not contesting anything," I replied calmly. "You want someone younger, more technologically current, better aligned with your vision. I understand completely. Thank you for the opportunity." The room went absolutely silent. You could hear the HVAC damper squeaking and someone's cell phone vibrating somewhere down the hallway. Amanda looked genuinely confused, as if she'd prepared for confrontation and I'd just handed her a signed acceptance letter instead. Harrison's confident expression faltered noticeably. Well, that's very professional of you, Quinn. We really do value your understanding." "Of course," I said, standing up smoothly. "I'll collect my personal belongings and be off the premises within 2 hours." I picked up my notebook and coffee mug, shook both their hands like we'd just concluded a successful business negotiation, and walked out of conference room 3C like I was heading to inspect equipment on the production floor. No tears, no raised voice, no passionate speeches about loyalty or years of service. Just that precise, clean silence that occurs when the person holding everything together quietly decides to stop. Back at my administrative wing desk, I sat down and looked at my workstation one final time. 2 monitors displaying real-time production data, SCADA system trending graphs, environmental monitoring dashboards. All green indicators. All systems performing perfectly. For now. I opened my bottom drawer and retrieved my personal external hard drive, the one labeled, System Documentation Critical Infrastructure. I'd been maintaining it for years as professional insurance, updating it every time I made significant modifications to our automation architecture. Not because I was planning anything vindictive, but because I knew that someday someone might need this information when I wasn't available to provide it. Today was that day. Here's what people don't understand about the systems I'd built over 14 years. They were elegant, efficient, and completely dependent on approximately 63 different manual interventions that only I knew how to execute properly. Not because I was hoarding institutional knowledge or trying to make myself irreplaceable, but because every single time I'd proposed comprehensive documentation projects or cross-training initiatives, Harrison's predecessors had responded with the same deflection. Maybe next quarter, Quinn. We don't have the budget bandwidth right now. So I'd ensured the systems would operate exactly as long as my access credentials remained active in the database, and not 1 millisecond longer. I disconnected my personal equipment, packed my toolbox and calibration devices into my work bag, and gave my desk plant one final watering. Then I logged into my workstation and began the most important 45 minutes of work I'd ever performed for this company. I didn't delete anything. I didn't sabotage anything. I simply cleaned up my personal workspace, removed my custom scripts and macros, cleared my saved passwords and security tokens, deleted my personal configuration files and shortcuts. Standard procedure for any employee departure, exactly as specified in the company's IT security policy. The fact that those personal scripts and configurations happen to be the invisible connective tissue holding together 14 years of accumulated technical complexity wasn't my problem anymore. At exactly 3:58 p.m., I logged out of my workstation for the final time, surrendered my security badge and facility access card to the front desk security guard, and walked out of Vanguard Pharmaceutical Manufacturing. I climbed into my 2015 Subaru Outback, started the engine, and drove to my house to wait for the inevitable chaos to begin. My house was peaceful when I arrived at 4:22 p.m. The satisfying kind of peace where you don't feel obligated to fill the silence with television noise or background music. I walked directly to my kitchen, opened the cabinet where I kept the wine I'd been saving for a special occasion, and poured myself a generous glass of Pinot Noir. Apparently, getting terminated on a Wednesday afternoon qualified as sufficiently special. I sat on my back deck, propped my feet on the railing, and checked my phone. Nothing urgent yet. A text from Zoe asking if I wanted to video chat this weekend. A missed call from Dylan Crane. He probably already sensed something was wrong. That young man was perceptive, more aware than anyone gave him credit for. At 4:45 p.m., my phone started buzzing. First call, Dylan. Quinn, hey, sorry to bother you, but I'm seeing weird error messages on the reactor temperature control system. It's showing something about authentication timeout. Everything was fine an hour ago. I let it go to voicemail. Second call, production supervisor. Third call, quality assurance manager. Fourth call, Amanda from HR, probably realizing she hadn't collected my equipment access keys. I turned my phone face down on the deck table and went inside to work on my home improvement project. Nothing clears your mind like refinishing hardwood floors when the corporate world is imploding behind you. See, I knew exactly what was happening at Vanguard. Without my active credentials, the automated recipe management system would start timing out within 90 minutes. The environmental monitoring scripts I'd been manually triggering every afternoon would fail their next scheduled execution. Most critically, the batch record validation system that interfaced with our FDA compliance database would hit a dead end at midnight when it tried to generate the mandatory daily reports. That validation system was my masterpiece of necessary engineering compromise. Back in 2020, when Vanguard upgraded their enterprise quality management software, the new system was completely incompatible with our production automation platform. The vendor quoted us $340,000 in 9 months to build a proper integration solution. I solved it in 1 weekend with a custom middleware application that ran under my personal credentials because it was more efficient than waiting for IT to provision a proper service account. Everything would continue operating just long enough for people to assume the transition was smooth, then cascade into complete failure when the next automated process tried to execute. By 5:30 p.m., my missed calls counter had reached 18. I didn't answer a single one. Instead, I opened another glass of wine and video called my daughter Zoe in Detroit. Hey Mom, you're home early, she said, her face appearing on my tablet screen. Everything okay? Everything's fine, I told her. Just had a career transition today. What kind of career transition? The involuntary kind. Your mother got terminated for being too old and not technologically current enough. Zoe was quiet for several seconds. She'd grown up watching me work overnight shifts and weekend emergencies, taking calls during family dinners, rushing to the facility during holidays. She understood better than most people what my work actually required. Their loss, she finally said firmly. You want me to drive home this weekend? We can work on your deck renovation and you can tell me what really happened. That sounds perfect, I said. Bring your appetite. I'll make that lasagna you love. After we disconnected, I went out to my garage and pulled out the floor sander I'd rented for my living room project. Working with my hands, solving physical problems that had clear solutions and predictable outcomes, was the perfect antidote to corporate politics. My phone kept buzzing from inside the house, but I ignored it completely. Instead, I focused on sanding the old finish off the oak flooring, a methodical process that required patience and attention to detail. Similar to maintaining industrial control systems, but more honest about its complexity. Around 7 p.m. I heard a car door close in my driveway. Through the garage window I watched Dylan Crane walking up my front path. He looked stressed, carrying his laptop bag and wearing the expression of someone who'd just discovered that the building was structurally unsound and he was the only one with the blueprints. Quinn, he called out. I know you're home. Your car's in the garage. I turned off the floor sander and met him at the front door. Dylan. I figured you'd be the first to understand what's happening. What happened? He asked, cutting directly to the point. Harrison sent out a company-wide email at 5 p.m. saying you decided to pursue other opportunities. Then half our production systems started throwing error codes nobody's ever seen before. Harrison decided I was too old for the digital transformation, I said matter-of-factly. So I collected my belongings and left. His face went pale. Quinn, the recipe management system is completely down. The environmental monitoring isn't logging data. The batch validation system is showing warning messages I don't even understand. And Harrison keeps telling me to just fix it, like these systems aren't incredibly complex. What did you tell him? That these systems are way more interconnected than he realizes, and that you're the only person who really understands the complete architecture. He paused. He didn't seem to believe me. I gestured for him to come inside. We sat at my kitchen table and I opened my laptop to show him the remote monitoring dashboard I maintained on my personal systems. Red alerts everywhere. Process timeouts, database connection failures, integration errors cascading through every major production system. This is what happens when you terminate the person who's been maintaining everything, I said. I didn't sabotage anything, Dylan. I just stopped holding it all together. He stared at the screen, watching error counts incrementing in real time. How long before everything crashes completely? The batch validation system will fail at midnight when it tries to generate the FDA compliance reports. After that, it's going to be a very educational day at Vanguard Pharmaceutical Manufacturing. Can you fix it? I looked at this young engineer who'd been genuinely eager to learn, who'd asked intelligent questions and taken meticulous notes, who'd actually cared about understanding the work instead of just completing assigned tasks. He reminded me of myself 25 years ago, back when I believed competence and dedication would be sufficient. I could, I said. But I don't work for Vanguard anymore. He nodded slowly, understanding the situation perfectly. What should I do? Document everything that's failing. Capture screenshots of every error message. Maintain detailed logs of when each system degrades and what error codes you're observing. Tomorrow morning, Harrison's going to be in complete panic mode, and someone will need to explain to senior leadership exactly what happened. And then what? I smiled. Then you're going to learn about the wonderful world of emergency consulting rates. Dylan left around 8 p.m. with a printed copy of my high-level system architecture diagram and a clear understanding of just how deep the operational hole was about to become. I made a simple dinner, watched the sunset from my back deck and went to bed early. At 11:53 p.m., my phone started ringing with calls from numbers I didn't recognize. I powered it off completely and got the best night's sleep I'd had in years. Thursday morning, I woke at my usual 6:15 a.m., made coffee and checked the news like any other day. The difference was, for the first time in 14 years, I wasn't worried about production alarms or overnight batch failures. That was someone else's problem now. My phone showed 62 missed calls and 34 text messages. I powered it off again and went to continue my floor refinishing project. Around 10:30 a.m., a car I didn't recognize pulled into my driveway. Through the front window, I watched a woman in an expensive suit get out and walk toward my door. She had that urgent, slightly desperate expression that corporate attorneys get when their clients are losing money by the minute. "Miss Carter? I'm Elizabeth Winters, corporate counsel for Vanguard Pharmaceutical Manufacturing. I was hoping we could talk." I wiped sawdust off my hands and invited her into my kitchen. She looked around at my comfortable personal space, the complete opposite of those sterile corporate conference rooms we'd both spent too much time in. "I'll be direct," she said. "We're experiencing some significant operational difficulties that require your specific expertise." "I gathered that from the 62 missed calls," I replied. "The batch validation system failed at midnight. We can't generate FDA compliance reports. The recipe management platform is completely offline. Our environmental monitoring system hasn't recorded a single data point since yesterday evening." She paused. "We have 3 production lines completely shut down, and the other 3 are operating on manual overrides that we can't maintain indefinitely." I nodded sympathetically. "That sounds serious." "Harrison brought in an emergency automation contractor from Chicago," Elizabeth continued. "They examined your system architecture for 4 hours and said they'd need at least 3 weeks just to understand how everything interconnects." "3 weeks sounds optimistic," I said. Elizabeth leaned forward. "Look, Quinn, I won't waste your time with corporate language. We made a mistake. A significant mistake. We're prepared to bring you back with a substantial promotion and salary increase if you can help us resolve this crisis." I walked to the coffee maker and poured myself another cup. "That's very generous, Elizabeth, but I don't work for Vanguard anymore." "We understand that. But we're prepared to make this worth your time." "I'm happy to consult," I said. "Emergency industrial systems recovery starts at $475 per hour. Minimum engagement 40 hours. Payment in advance by wire transfer." The silence stretched for a full 45 seconds. I could practically hear her calculating the cost in her head. $19,000 just to get started. That's a significant investment," she said carefully. "That's correct. Additionally, I work remotely from my home office. I'm not returning to that facility." Elizabeth pulled out her phone and made a call. I couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but from her expressions, it involved multiple uncomfortable explanations to people who weren't accustomed to being held hostage by their own infrastructure. 32 minutes later, my business account received a wire transfer notification. I opened my laptop, stretched my fingers, and logged into Vanguard systems remotely for the first time in 20 hours. It was significantly worse than I'd expected. Someone had attempted to fix the recipe management issue by manually editing database records and had corrupted half the batch formulations. The environmental monitoring system wasn't just offline, it was actively broadcasting error messages to every connected system like a digital contagion. The compliance reporting system had given up entirely and was displaying a generic error screen where the validation reports should appear. But the real catastrophe was what Harrison had done in his panic. He'd attempted to restore from backup without understanding that our backup system only covered the production databases, not the custom integration middleware that made everything function together. It was like trying to repair a car engine by replacing all the spark plugs but removing the timing belt. I spent 4 days methodically rebuilding what had been destroyed, documenting every single process in exhaustive detail, and training Dylan Crane on the critical procedures. He was exceptionally quick to learn and didn't waste time with ego or office politics, just absorbed information and asked intelligent questions. On Monday afternoon, Elizabeth called again. "Quinn, the executive leadership team would like to discuss bringing you back permanently. Director of Manufacturing Systems, 52% salary increase, full benefits package, stock options." I was in my garage, applying polyurethane finish to my newly refinished living room floor. The work was honest, straightforward, and completely under my control. "That's very generous, Elizabeth, but I'm content consulting. The leadership team is prepared to go higher. We could make it 65%. "It's not about the compensation," I said, wiping excess finish off my brush. "It's about professional respect. You had 14 years to demonstrate that respect, and instead you let some MBA consultant with a TED Talk convince you I was obsolete." She was quiet for a moment. What happened to Harrison? Last I heard, he's been reassigned to strategic initiatives, Elizabeth said diplomatically. In corporate language, that meant they'd isolated him in an office with no real responsibilities until his employment contract expired naturally. And Dylan? He's been promoted to senior automation engineer with a team of 4 junior technicians. He's implementing all the documentation and cross-training protocols you recommended. Good, I said. He'll do excellent work. The consulting arrangement continued for another 5 months. Every time something critical failed, which happened more frequently than Vanguard wanted to acknowledge, they'd call me. I'd resolve it remotely, send an invoice, and return to my actual life. Eventually, Dylan and his team developed sufficient confidence to handle the routine operations. The emergency calls became scheduled maintenance requests, then occasional technical questions, then nothing at all. Which was exactly what I wanted. These days I spend my mornings working on home improvement projects. The living room floors look beautiful, and I've started renovating my basement into a proper workshop. Afternoons I volunteer with the STEM mentorship program at the local high school. Turns out young engineers actually appreciate learning from someone who understands how complex systems genuinely work. And yes, I still do consulting work. But now it's on my terms, for clients who value experience over buzzwords, competence over corporate politics. Zoe graduated with her master's degree in industrial engineering last semester and accepted a position at a robotics company in Pittsburgh. She calls every Sunday to tell me about the problems they're solving and the automation systems they're developing. Sometimes she asks for advice about dealing with managers who don't understand engineering. I tell her what I learned through experience. Respect isn't automatic, but competence is undeniable. Sometimes I drive past the Vanguard facility on my way to the hardware store for project supplies. The parking lot looks identical, the production lights are still illuminated. Everything appears normal from the outside. But I know what's different now. They understand the actual cost of discarding experience because someone seems inconvenient for your corporate transformation vision. The systems don't care about your age, your educational background, or your management philosophy. They only care about whether you know what you're doing. And after 14 years of keeping their pharmaceutical production operation running flawlessly, I definitely knew what I was doing. The real victory wasn't the consulting income or watching Harrison crash spectacularly. It was finally receiving the professional respect I'd earned, even if it required losing me for them to understand it. That's worth more than any salary they could have offered.